I'm Richard Messing, founder and executive director of the World Ethics Organization, otherwise known as the WEO. There's not enough time today to mention all the volunteers and partner organizations by name who helped make this event possible. I do want to recognize Elisa Lockwood, a WEO director, and Maggie Girajda, a former WEO advisor, for formulating the original event plan. Thanks to Audrey Steinberg, the WEO volunteer who originally brought Global Ethics Day to the attention of WEO's executive team. Thank you to Joe Wilmot and Sean Bierman from the World Referral Network for providing essential communications and logistical support, and to Garrett Lang, founder of the Free Thinkers Institute, for helping spread the word through FTI's extensive network. The WEO was formed in 2022 as a 501c3 nonprofit with the global mission to bring ethics into the mainstream of societal discourse in the home, in the workplace, and in the public square. Given the importance of ethics, and it's a mystery that our public schools don't teach ethics, and universities rarely require one ethics course for most undergraduate programs. Even though ethics has been a field of study for at least 3,000 years, history is our witness that the evolution of ethics has been insufficient for solving the chronic ethical problems that continue to plague humanity. The WEO is dedicated to solving this mystery. We invite you to participate in this global mission. Today, Harvey Seifter will present some research on ethical leadership, followed by 2 arts-based workshops. Don't forget to have at least one blank sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, and a pencil when participating in the workshop. Harvey is one of the world's leading authorities on future-ready leadership and organizational creativity. Harvey founded and leads 2 groundbreaking organizations, the Art of Science Learning and Creating Futures That Work. The Art of Science Learning is a National Science Foundation funded research center that uses the arts to spark innovation in science, technology, education, and healthcare. Creating Futures That Work is the world's leading company that uses the arts to develop future-ready leaders and high-performance teams. Harvey has also taught collaboration and innovation to thousands of business leaders at General Electric's Global Leadership Development Center at Crotonville, New York. Harvey was a participant in the White House Global Cultural Initiative. He's a fellow of the Royal Society for Art, and his book, Leadership Ensemble, has been translated into 9 languages. After the 2 workshops today, Hassan Sorrells will interview Harvey and will facilitate a Q&A session. Hassan Sorrells is the founder of Leadership Toolbox, a leadership training and development company located in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and he is also the chief operating officer of GrowthCraft, a Boston-based firm that connects entrepreneurs to the support and guidance they need to mold their vision into thriving, purpose-driven companies. Hassan has served as a leadership consultant, coach, and subject matter expert to Fortune 1000 companies and small businesses and entrepreneurs in the space of leadership, organizational behavior, conflict management, negotiation, and dispute resolution for the last 20 years. Hassan hosts and produces the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, and his latest book, 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership, advances the idea that all problems in all organizations can be solved through the intentional application of effective leadership practices and principles. Sean Bierman, our event manager, will now give us a few housekeeping tips for today. Sean?
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to start with making sure that everybody knows how to do what we need to do during the session. All right. So while you're here, the entire time you're here, with the exception of when you're in a breakout room, we'll manage all of the audio for you. There will be an opportunity for questions, and as you're thinking of them, please feel free to put them in the chat. When the opportunity for sharing arises, we're going to call on you and let you know that you are unmuted. You may see a prompt that says the host would like you to unmute. Accept the prompt by clicking unmute, and then we'll be able to hear you. If for some reason you have any technical disruption or there's a lot of background noise during your sharing, we may have to move on in service of time. So I'm just going to quickly tell you how to use the raise hand icon. So depending on what Zoom version you have, how to raise your electronic hand is going to be slightly different. And we're going to go through the instructions for a computer first. So as I go through these instructions, it's best if you follow along with me on your device. If you're using the newest version of Zoom and you're on a computer, go ahead and click the reactions button on your toolbar and click raise hand to raise your electronic hand and keep it raised. Don't worry, we're not calling on anybody yet. We just want to make sure that everybody knows how to work it. If you're on an earlier version of Zoom, go ahead and click on the participants button on your toolbar. A new window will appear to your right, and in the bottom right-hand corner of that window, you'll see a raise hand button. And go ahead and click on that button and raise your hand and keep it raised. Very good. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. All right. If you are on a phone or a tablet, the instructions are slightly different. So I'm just going to give you a slightly different instruction for that. If you click on the three dots, if you click on the middle of your screen and then on the three dots that appear, you should see a raise hand icon. All right, everyone, if you haven't done so already and haven't tested it out, now's your last chance to test out this raise hand icon. So go ahead and raise your hand so that we make sure that everybody knows how to use that button. Great, thanks. Awesome. There we go. That's how it's done. And now I'm going to turn it all over to Harvey. Harvey, please.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And Richard and everybody in the World Ethics Organization, thanks so much for bringing together this really exciting and important event. So we're going to be spending some time this afternoon doing a few things. One is that we're going to look a little bit at what the research tells us about ethical leadership, about what an ethical leader is, how to develop one, and what are the economic implications and benefits of ethical leadership in organizations. We're going to move kind of quickly, though, through that part of it into what I think is the really kind of fun part, which is hands-on work, activity, rolling up our sleeves and experiencing a way that we can work with the arts and creativity and arts-based learning to strengthen and develop these core skills of ethical leadership. And then finally, we're going to move from that into a conversation, which Hasan is going to lead us through and talk a little bit about all of this. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and jump right into it. So I'm going to start with this basic question. What makes an ethical leader? And what do we mean by the qualities and the skills and the behaviors and the attributes of ethical leadership? So this actually became the subject of a research collaboration that my organization, the Art of Science Learning, developed with the World Ethics Organization over a year ago. And what we did is we talked to 14 really renowned experts in fields ranging from ethics and leadership to business and education and nonprofits. And for all of these people, we asked this basic question: what are the foundational skills, attributes, and behaviors of ethical leaders? We did that in facilitated group conversations. We did that in individual one-on-ones. We really sort of tried to develop insights into the perspectives of these very diverse, this range of experts. And they told us some really interesting things. So this is the set of skills and attributes that these people surfaced, these experts in ethical leadership surfaced and told us about. Now, I want to be clear. This is not a comprehensive list. This isn't the universal list of all the things that are the qualities of an ethical leader. I'm sure that each of us can look at this list and say, well, it should also have this and three other things on it. And I would agree. So it's not a comprehensive list, but it is a very important and powerful and compelling list. So we captured everything, not everything that everyone said, but everything that came up from at least half of the people that we spoke with. And that's still a set of 16 different skills and attributes. So if we take a look at those, they actually fall into two broad categories. The first category is self-leadership, the things that, how do we lead ourselves? The things that we do, the mindsets, the behaviors that we develop that allow us to really start the foundations of ethical leadership by leading ourselves ethically. So these are things like authenticity and reflection, self-awareness, agency, the ability and the skill of identifying reality when we see it. Using our imagination to see what isn't there, seeing multiple perspectives, aligning our actions to values. These are all the fundamental elements of self-leadership that kept coming up as the experts spoke with us about ethical leadership. So then there's a second set. These are leading others. These are things like empathy and collaboration, trust and mutual respect, openness, transparency, empowering, co-creation. Taken as a comprehensive set, it's a pretty good starting point. It's not, again, an absolute universal comprehensive list, but it is a pretty good starting point to understand what we mean by the skills and the behaviors of ethical leaders. So now that we have some information about those, the really key question that immediately comes is, how can we develop those skills? How do we actually help people to grow into ethical leadership by developing those skills, those behaviors, that capacity, that muscle memory? And for that, I want to share some research that we've done at the Art of Science Learning that goes back a dozen years. So I want to be clear, this is not research into ethical leadership per se. Up until we began our collaboration with the World Ethics Organization a year ago, we hadn't specifically researched ethical leadership. But we have done a great deal of research into the impacts of arts-based learning on all kinds of behaviors. And included in those behaviors were all of these. So here's what we found out about the impact that arts-based learning has on these skills and behaviors. All of the ones in red here, we have developed proof of impact, really, of a causal relationship between working with the arts and developing these skills. It's based on quantitative experimental research data. Much of that work was done as part of our collaboration with the National Science Foundation. So we've worked with all kinds of people as we've explored this. I mean, we're talking about scientists and researchers, we're talking about field workers and healthcare workers in hospitals and in public health settings. We've worked with high school students and college students and community leaders. We've worked with legal administrators in New York and the heads of laboratories in Brazil. In all of these very, very different groups of people, we see over and over again that when we work with the arts, we strengthen these foundational skills. So that's actually 11 of the 16. So there are 5 others where we don't have that kind of quantitative experimental research data, a proof of impact. But for those, we do have a data that shows a strong correlation between working with the arts and the development of authenticity and reflection and imagination and self-awareness and aligning our actions to our values. So it's pretty clear from all of that, and I'm happy to share a website where you can dig deeper into any and all of those things and learn more about what we know and what we don't yet know but are working on in terms of what the data tells us. But it's pretty clear. Arts-based experiential learning is a powerful way to strengthen and build the core foundational skills of ethical leadership. So I'm going to give you one example of what that data looks like in practice. So what you're seeing here is from a research study that we did about a half dozen years ago. And this is working with scientists and engineers and community leaders in San Diego. They were working at the time of the drought there on trying to find good, effective community responses collaboratively to the challenge of the drought. And they worked together on teams for a 5-week period, and we tracked and observed their behaviors very carefully. So what you're seeing here is their emotionally intelligent behaviors, and this is almost kind of a classic pattern because we see this in teams of all kinds working on all kinds of problems, which is that at the beginning, there's not a lot of emotionally intelligent behavior because people don't really necessarily know each other and aren't comfortable, but they kind of quickly develop that. It grows and it strengthens over the course of initial work. And then at a certain point, it flatlines. It even goes backwards as the collaborative challenges get more difficult, as people grow impatient, as there are winners and losers in terms of decisions that are being made and so forth. So this is a kind of a landscape of how teams typically collaborate. So this was an experimental study. We set up a similar number of teams, identical in every way, working with the same problems, on the same challenges, the same types of people, working the same amount of time, the same conditions. The only difference was that these other teams, these experimental teams, spent 9 hours over the 5-week period working with the arts in different ways. And this is what happened. So those blue teams, the ones that worked with the arts just a little bit over a 5-week period, their emotionally intelligent behaviors soared. And it began to strengthen just at the same point that the other teams, their emotionally intelligent behavior was flatlining. In other words, it's pretty clear when the challenges became their most acute, the teams that had done a little bit of work with the arts found it in them to bring emotional intelligence to their behavior and collaboration at roughly triple the rate of the other teams. There's a lot more data, but I wanted to share this one data point with you because it tells a story. So I want to move from there then to the question of what does this actually matter in economic terms? There are lots of reasons to be interested in the question of ethical leadership, but we don't generally talk about it from the standpoint of the economic stakes, and yet those stakes are huge. So first of all, we know from at least 2 decades of research that there are powerful relationships and powerful impacts that ethical leadership can have in strengthening workforce engagement. And by that, I'm talking about improved ability to recruit and retain and motivate people, increased productivity, where ethical leadership is present in the organization, and ultimately greater rates of innovation and successful innovation and purposeful innovation. So those are just a few of the ways that ethical leadership has a powerful bottom line impact. Here's another way of looking at it. We're talking about workforce engagement. The global cost of low workforce engagement, according to Gallup, in their study 2 years ago, was $8.9 trillion, which is a pretty staggering figure. So if we can do things that will improve workforce engagement, there's a lot of benefit. And it's clear that ethical leadership is a very powerful way of improving workforce engagement. Here's a bit of context and evidence for that. This is a study that was done at Calgary University. A team of researchers worked with 300 job seekers, and they really studied how they made their decisions, where they went for, where they accepted offers, all kinds of things related to that. And the fundamental conclusion was that the presence of an ethical CEO, the perception that there's an ethical CEO in the organization, functions as a uniquely powerful recruitment tool for attracting job seekers. There's a little bit about the why. Because candidates believe they'll be treated fairly. They'll perceive greater social environmental responsibility. They'll experience moral elevation. These are what we learn from doing that. These are powerful reasons to understand just how important this question of ethical leadership is to engaging workforces, and engaging workforces is to the bottom line. So with that, I want to move us from a bunch of data into some activities, because I think the best way to experience arts-based learning in action is to actually act on it and see what kinds of impacts it has. So we're going to focus in this initial activity very specifically on something that will have its impact mostly in that self-leadership category of core attributes of ethical leadership. So let me give you a little bit of context and set the stage. So take a good look at that image. We call it a typical view of the world. This is an eye tracking study. There are hundreds of these studies. There are thousands of these images in these various studies. And this is typical. This is how most of us look at the world most of the time. So there's a couple of quick things that are worth thinking about. One is that when we look at the world typically, we don't see very much of it. We actually only see maybe 10% of it or less. The other thing is that when we look at the world, typically we're always looking at the same limited portions of the world. We tend to focus intensely in the center of the image, especially if there's a figure of a person there, because that tends to attract us. We check the peripheries a little bit to make sure that there's nothing too important happening. We kind of miss the rest. So this is your brain on art. What happens to your brain and your eye when you do the things that art students do? Think about art, learn about art, make art. You learn a lot about art, but you also learn to see the world differently. And a couple of important things about seeing the world differently. One is you see much more of the world. Typically here you can see from that image maybe 30 or 40% of the image instead of just 10%. But the second is you're seeing it from all different perspectives. You're following your intuition and your instinct and your individuality. And so that has a great deal of implication for how we understand the world and all the things we take in, and also about how we collaborate with others. Because if we have a bunch of people all looking at the same thing from the same narrow perspective, that's going to impact our choices. And similarly, if we're able to work with other people who have very different perspectives and we put together a fuller, richer image, that is also going to impact things pretty profoundly. Okay, so that's setting the stage. So in a moment, I'm going to put an image up on the screen. I'd like you to have that piece of paper and pencil handy. And take a good look at this image. And then I'm going to ask you to very simply draw what you see. Just look at it very carefully, draw what you see. There's only a couple of really simple rules. If you're tempted to put your paper up to the screen and trace it, I'm going to ask you to resist that temptation and not to do that. And also, if you have a screen that you can manipulate to flip it around, I'm going to ask you not to do that either. So just look at what's there, draw what you see. I'm going to give you 5 minutes for it. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. I'll let you know when you're down to about your last minute so it doesn't sneak up on you. And with that, please begin. So I'm going to ask you now to take a good look at what you just drew. And now take the paper and reverse it. Turn it upside down or right side up. And then finally, I'm going to invite you to hold it up to the camera so we can all see it. If you have a virtual background and you can shut it off, we'll be able to see it better. Oh, wow, look at that. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. Oh, these are really great. Okay, thank you. So you can send them down now, but really congratulations on these. These are wonderful. So I wonder if anybody was surprised by what just happened, what you just did. Please feel free to sort of just open up your mic and, quick thoughts.
They won't be able to open up their mic, but if they raise their hand, we can certainly.
Okay,
call on
fine,
them.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so has anybody here ever recently done any drawing? Are any of you professional artists? Okay. Have some serious involvement with spending time with horses? Not a lot of any of those things. It's a very complicated task to actually take in 5 minutes a representation of some lines and turn that into a horse. And you came up with wonderful drawings. Does anybody have any thoughts about how you were able to do that? Yes.
Sorry, if I may, Harvey.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Hey, Sans Sorrels, everyone. So I'm kind of a little bit of a cheater at this because I went to art school. So I'm a little bit of a cheater at this. I know what you're trying
Okay.
to, I know what you're trying to achieve, Harvey. But I will say that one of the major things that I learned, which is how I was able to produce the drawing, and I haven't sketched like this in probably 15 years, was the ability to see the inside of the object.
Great.
To be able to perceive more of the object than what is actually being visualized.
Yeah, to look very carefully and to perceive. Audrey, you have your hand up.
Her hand was up. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Sabian, it looks like you have your hand up.
Hello.
Hi. So this is Audrey, and for me, what I did, and I've done similar things, actually, even drew a horse, but it was decades ago. And I have taken some painting and other art-based courses. So I sort of globally tried to do a quick outline and then go back and fill in with some of the details. So I knew where the legs were going to be and the general body and the head and that. And I knew we only had 5 minutes. So, I think I basically accomplished to get all the lines in, but that's how kind of having a point of reference made it able to fill in more of the details. So I started more globally or generally, and then was able to get more specific.
That's great. Sabian?
Hello. Yes. I did basically the same thing as Audrey. And I only took like graphic design in high school a long time ago. But
Okay.
I remember in that class I could only draw blobs from my imagination, but I could trace really well. And this is the same thing I did. I'm like, I'll get that global outline to make sure I have the proportionality and all the general stuff correct, and then sort of work my way inwards with more detail.
That's great.
And I
So I'm
managed to
going
get
to
the
ask
outline.
a quick question of all of you, and I'll ask you to just respond to it by raising a physical hand if your digital ones aren't working right. So it seems to me, from what I can see and what I've heard, that what you all did was you just followed the lines and you drew the lines really carefully. You looked really carefully. Is that true? Is that pretty much how you did this? Okay, great. So the flip side of that, it seems like you weren't thinking a lot about a horse. You were thinking about what you saw and the lines. Is that true? So I'm going to suggest that there's some important connection there between not thinking about the horse, but actually just looking very carefully and drawing what you see that allowed you to do something which is actually a very difficult task and which you don't have a lot of experience doing or a lot of practice doing, or certainly not haven't been doing that recently. So there's a famous artist named Robert Irwin who wrote a book, and he titled it with a saying of his, which is "Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing that one sees." And if you think about it, that's what you did. As we turned the horse upside down, you sort of weren't thinking about, oh, this is a horse, and maybe I don't know how to draw a horse, and I've got all these self-limiting beliefs, and maybe I'm not creative, and all the rest of it. And instead, you just drew what was there, you see, and which you're perfectly capable of doing, and you created some really wonderful things. So we're gonna move on for now. Thank you for doing this. One thing that I'll tell you, we do this with people a lot and all over the world. And one of the things that I often see is that if I come back to somebody even years later that I've done this activity with, often find somewhere in their office or on their desk, they have that course that they drew with a little signature in the corner. It's a visual touchstone for them of a moment where they flipped an assumption on its head and saw the world maybe through some fresh eyes. So I want to encourage you to do the same. Sign it and put it up. It's wonderful work. Thank you. I'm gonna move us back into screen sharing now, because I want to move us to the next activity that we're going to do. So the one that we just did was really focused on self-leadership and some of those key behaviors. So now we're going to add to that a little bit and look at some of the behaviors that are also related to leading others. So we're going to spend some time doing a different kind of activity, but it also puts arts at the center. We're going to start with a challenge, and this is the challenge that I'm going to ask you to work on over the next few minutes. I'm going to actually read it out loud so we can all hear it. Poor students who need to work night jobs to earn money are much more likely to fail their college entrance exams than their more affluent peers. High school teacher Brian Sanchez wants to find a way to level the playing field. School policy will not allow him to share exam questions with students to help them prepare, which is what he believes would be the best way to meet his objective. What's the solution to that? So this is an opportunity now to do another sketch. So take another sheet of paper, or if you only have that one, flip it over on its back and use that. And I'm going to ask you to do some quick sketches of the solution to that challenge. So you're going to work individually. You're going to sketch your thoughts and ideas, sketch them. So we're often tempted to like create little PowerPoint slides that are diagrams and that show us, and that's fine. But I encourage you, sketch your thoughts and ideas. Sketch how you would deal with this challenge and work quickly. You'll only have 5 minutes, and actually I'm going to shave a minute off that. So you're going to have 4 minutes. And with that, I'm going to put the challenge back up so you can be referring to it. And hi, everybody. So you should have the challenge up on the screen. So the first step here is you've just landed in your room with a few people who you may well not know. So take a few minutes to get to know them. But the way to do that is I want each of you to share the work that you've just done. So share your little back of the napkin kind of drawings. So you only have about 6 minutes to do this. So you're going to have to move quickly and just explain what's in the drawing. Don't take too long on anyone. I want you all to kind of keep eye on time and make sure that everybody has a chance. So why don't you get started? Very quickly, what was this process like? I mean, you came together with people you didn't know. You had a very small amount of time. You have a real challenge here in front of you. What was the process like? Anybody that cares to comment on that? Joseph. Joe.
Yeah, no, I found it very useful. It was very interesting for us to debate the solution or variations of the solution, and then we had Brian Erickson, who was the scribe, and he drew as we went through it, and he tried to do a pictorial representation of what we were doing. It was interesting how we continued to add on different layers and enrich the solution even further. It was a very interesting exercise in my view.
Wonderful, thank you. Other thoughts, comments? I'm seeing some of them are also popping up in chat, and it's great to see that people have really great collaborative experiences. Let's see, Anna.
Yeah, so I also thought it was super interesting. Initially going into it, I didn't kind of think it was going to be such a big discussion. I'm like, oh, it could be simple. We can figure it. And then there's like different thoughts and different opinions and different solutions. And even once we'd arrive at a solution, it still would have a problem. Like inherently, we'd arrive at the next problem. And so the final solution that I really to myself thought like why would this not work? And then I thought more, I'm like, wait a second, there's still this problem. And then someone else pointed out another problem. I'm like, holy cow, we're back where we started. So, but it was
great.
fun. It was a good discussion.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? What was it like? Carolee.
Carolee? Yes, our
Yes.
group it was a great collaboration as well, and we all came into how do you best use the time, and then a discussion went around time, right? What can you do in the time? And then also realizing that the student needs to be aware of what time he or she has, and so that was quite interesting.
Great, thank you. Sabian, let's see if we can get you in this time. We tried earlier.
Hello. Yeah. So we had
Sabian?
4 people.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we had four people in our group, and we started off explaining our understandings of the question itself and the sort of situations that each person would be in that situation, like the students with jobs, the students without jobs, and the teacher. And we shared our sort of thought processes on how to approach a solution. And we had difficulty representing that in drawings. But we were discussing sort of technical ways of how to fit a solution into that set of requirements. And we just shared our ideas of solutions and tried to mix them together and try to figure out how to draw something like that.
Great, thank you. So one of the things that we see a lot of here is that people, it takes unpredictable turns. People tend to be surprised. And in that sense, it's kind of different than a typical conversation where a group of people sit down, let's talk about this. It moves in much more open and expansive directions. I'm wondering if you had that experience or what your thought is. Jeffrey, it looks like you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to mention there were only 2 of us in our group, and I've been through this same exercise 3 times before. So our brainstorming session was pretty fast. And there was another 1 or 2 items that came up as we were talking about it. We had one person that added or that came on at the very last minute that had an additional suggestion, but by then we had all the drawings already made.
Great. Kevin.
Here we go. Yeah, I was trying to figure out the advantage of the drawings because when we were drawing it ourselves, I was just the bullet points were coming out like I would normally problem solve. But I think once we start our drawing, then it brought up a lot more ideas. And so when we had our base of our drawing, it seemed to be able to create more creativity within us.
That's a great comment, and it's one of the things that works wonderfully with art. If you look at it as a separate activity, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go back to my thinking about it, that can be helpful because it can shake up perspectives. But when you actually are kind of merging the two together, and the flow of thought, the flow of ideas and possibilities, the divergent thinking, all of the things that come in, the open doors to collaboration that kind of move quickly when you can actually show physical representations of things, that leads to all kinds of possibilities. Trevor.
Yeah, I don't think we looked at it that way. If anything, I think I started with the divergent thinking and then drew the picture. I mean, I looked at it as we assumed that it was probably some kind of ethical dilemma and he couldn't share the questions with these students. And then I thought, well, how do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate the issue, which is they have to work? So the teacher can give them money instead and essentially say, don't work, here's money instead to cover or I could take your shift at 7-Eleven. But if the issue was they can't study because they have to work, then take away the issue and make sure that they get paid by some other way. But that, again, that was the divergent thinking that I came up with. The drawing just seemed to be something that came afterwards. Another person in the group brought up some experience from his own experience when he was a foreign student, where he had to have, long jobs, and then the students just kind of got together and studied together, kind of a group study sort of thing. But again, in both those cases, it was either divergent thinking or experience. The drawing didn't necessarily come first.
Great. There are so many different ways that people can work with these. That's actually one of the very powerful advantages of using the arts in these kinds of ways. You develop the skills not because this is how you need to learn to use the arts and then repeat it exactly that way, but because you're actually finding your own paths. These are almost universal tools of human expression and creativity. And it's really exciting to see different people and different teams find different ways to use them, but all of them essentially able to, one way or another, get further into some new territory than they could have otherwise. I mean, if you think about it, the entire process that you went through from whatever you first thought when I put that challenge up to when you came up with your team solution, and the conversations and the drawings along the way, whatever that combination, that was a pretty rich, interesting road, and you traveled it in about 25 minutes. Alyssa.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that the drawing made it necessary to really be focused on what the problem and solution was. And so the drawing itself really helped me to organize my thoughts better so that I could come up with a simple solution. In fact, I don't know that I ever came up with a more simple solution without drawing. I mean, otherwise I would have had so many bullet points and different ideas. But this was very helpful in helping me to really streamline and organize my thinking.
That's great. Could you take a moment and show that drawing again?
Well, I finished it. I don't know if you can, let's see, where do I have to hold on? Can you see it? So the idea was that, oh, here we go.
No, the blurred script, the virtual. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So the idea was that the problem is that time is money, and this poor student needs the money. And so how do you solve for that? We discussed that that the answer wasn't really to reduce the value of the instruction by focusing only on the test questions, because that invalidates a lot of the value of studying the broader context of things than just for studying for answers. And so we looked at the idea that knowledge is power, and that that to provide a rebate for exam success would solve that issue. And so what we decided to do was to do a review for the test, and then have teach testing strategies to help them be more successful at the test during the review period. And then when the tests were given back, that anybody who met the criteria of a specific grade or success in completing the test would get a rebate of their tuition, which, if it was necessary, it could be included in the cost of tuition, but to give them a rebate with a gift card.
Okay, so really rich. Thank you for that. I'm going to pitch it back over to Hasan, but before I do that, I'm just going to make one very quick comment and encourage you to think about this for a little bit. So this is not such an easy little challenge, and you were working with 2, 3, 4 people that you never met before, and you were able to explore these questions more than surface deep, and not just explore them, but listen to each other, learn from each other, find ways to converge around a solution in 23 minutes. that is a pretty impressive accomplishment. It's, I would say, easily on the level of drawing such great horses when you'd never drawn one before. So, of course, what the two have in common is that both of them are using the arts to help you to do things maybe that you couldn't have done otherwise, or differently, or better, or more of them. And in the process, really develop yourself and your collaboration and your skills. And all of these are foundational skills of ethical leadership. Hey, Sam.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Harvey, for leading us through those two great exercises and this great workshop. Please, everybody, take the time to give Harvey a hand. All right. This is a great contribution to thinking about how to build a future ready workforce. So while Harvey takes a sip of his coffee or his drink right there, I'm going to give him a chance to get his voice back. And I have some questions that I have developed that during the course of going through this process with you all, that I like Harvey to answer to kind of expand on some of the ideas that he's brought to the table around ethical leadership, and in particular around the intersection, which I think is amazing, the intersection between the practice of the arts and ethical leadership itself, and how those two things overlap with each other. Now, I have about 5 to 10 questions. I am not going to get through all of these. As a matter of fact, it would be impossible for me to do so within the time constraints that we have. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him sort of the most compelling couple of questions and see if we can get through a couple of those. And I would encourage you to connect with Harvey on LinkedIn. He also put his the links to his 2 websites in the chat. I would encourage you to go ahead and check those out. And get connected with him and his research there, and definitely reach out to him to find out more about the arts and how that impacts ethical leadership. Okay, so jumping in, Harvey, you kind of answered the question about what makes an ethical leader. You talked about the different character traits or the different aspects of ethical leadership, both from a self-leadership perspective and an other leadership or a team leadership perspective, which I thought was great. We also talked about how we can get the arts more into leadership. And so maybe that's a base question. Let's start with that, a baseline question. Many of us here work in a wide variety of different roles where either we are consulting with organizations or working directly in an organization to guide it towards a goal. How can we get more of this type of arts work that you just did with us into our practical day-to-day, which is very much focused on the utilitarian, the abstract, and the solution or getting solutions very quickly to problems, when it seems like all this art stuff is just frittering away our time? How do we get more people and more organizations to draw horses?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Hasan. Thank you for that. There's a couple of quick things that I would say. The first is that it doesn't have to take nearly as much time as people might think. There are very simple, really short practices that people can do in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, a couple of times a week for a few weeks. They don't necessarily require any kinds of supplies or materials beyond the things that they already have in front of them around the house or on their desk. It's really the choice of doing those. And those can become starting points for exploration. I mean, one of the great things about the arts is that there's not one way to do them. And there's not one art form or perspective or things that you can learn. It's where your own interest lies, where your passion is, where your curiosity is, where your instincts lead you. And just being willing to take that first step. And of course, we have lots of things that we've published and that others have published as well that have great little activities that you can do. That the French saying that the appetite comes with the meal.
Right.
So if you start doing it, it kind of becomes self-fulfilling. But the other part of it is I want to encourage people to think a lot about this idea that sometimes if you want to go fast, the best way to go fast is to start by going slow. And so you could go really fast, but if you don't start your problem solving by taking a little bit of time to think about what the actual problem is and that you're going to solve and what that means, in the end, you're going to find that you're circling back and it's going to take longer. So if you take that little bit of time at the beginning that seems to slow things down, it will have big payoffs at the other end.
Absolutely. Front load all the hard work, and there are no shortcuts, you know.
Yeah.
So I want to ping off of something else that you said in your answer there, because it relates to another question that I had written down. And by the way, you want to go check out Harvey's work at the art of science learning.com, that website, and the futuresthatwork.com. He has both of those websites in the chat. I would encourage you to check those both out for his kits, and of course to answer any questions that he may have that you may have about how to implement these kinds of practices in your organization. Okay, Harvey. So I want to key off something that you said in your answer to that question, because I have a background in conflict management, right? And I know a bunch of people that do dance and also combine dance with conflict management, right? And solving sticky conflict problems through the physical use of the body. So can you go a little bit in depth about these areas of art study, like music, dance, the visual arts, film? How do they all impact problem solving and ethical leadership in the same way, or do different arts create different impacts?
Different arts definitely can create some different impacts, and the same art can be used to achieve different impacts. So they're really rich sets of possibilities there. Thinking about conflict management, one of the most important lessons that I've had in my life from the arts came during the years when I was the director of Orpheus Chamber Orchestra, which is, among other things, in addition to being a great orchestra, it's known as the conductorless orchestra. It's the only orchestra in the world that rehearses and records and performs all of its work without a conductor. And as you can imagine, there was a fair amount of conflict without a conductor being the default person that would make all the decisions and so settle those conflicts. The rehearsals could be a place of very intense conflict. And one of the things that we learned is that those conflicts aren't only good, they're essential. That we want those kinds of conflicts. And I say those kinds of conflicts because we don't really want conflicts between people around personalities and politics and things like that, but about ideas and the best way to perform a piece of music. We want as much good conflict as we can, and we like to settle those conflicts by actually trying them out, creating little prototypes, and then getting real-time feedback in the moment on them. It actually is what allows great ensembles, whether it's an orchestra or an improv company or a jazz ensemble, it's what allows them to go through hundreds of ideas in a 2-hour rehearsal period and really work through them without killing each other and without killing the best ideas.
Awesome. Now, we only have about 4 minutes left in our session today. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This was a great event, and I want to encourage you to tell everybody that you know who believes in ethical leadership and the arts that they should be attending this event next year. I noticed that folks are putting their LinkedIn profiles in the chat. If you'd like to connect with folks, please go ahead and do that. Put your LinkedIn profile there if you have one in the chat. I already see that filling up. That's great. One final question with the last 2 minutes I have before we kick it over to Richard for our close here. We live in an overwhelmingly visual culture now, which kind of goes side by side with maybe a decline in our ethical approach or ethical posture, right, as leaders, right? Or maybe it's just a change or an evolution. What can we learn from living in this overwhelmingly visual culture? How can we take that and use that to create more ethical leadership approaches?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because we sometimes associate the visual culture with some of its manifestations, and some of its manifestations don't coexist terribly well with ethical practices and ethical leadership. But that's not inherent to a visual culture and visual means of expression. It's what we do with those things. So I think that visual culture gives us incredibly powerful, rich opportunities to share what we want to convey, to absorb information from others, and to actually to learn. And so much of what we're talking about, whether it's an innovation process, whether it's a group, a team that's coming together and sharing perspectives and drawing together or solving problems together, whatever it is that they're doing, the core of ethical leadership, I think, a very significant core, is learning. And the ability to learn, the openness to readiness to learn, the openness to new information, the willingness to tread on uncertainty and ambiguous ground, and not to run away from it or try to stomp it down, but to use that as an opportunity to learn together and to grow. Those are great. The visual element gives us powerful tools to do that with. So before I sign off of this, I just want to take just a moment to thank all of you. It's been great to work with you. Thank you for being here today. I did put a couple of websites in there. You're welcome to check them out, encouraged to check them out. And you may find, well, you will find a lot more detail to some of the research that I spoke very quickly about at the beginning, or anything else. And please feel free to follow up with me in person. And thank you for your interest in, passion for, and engagement with these core questions of ethical leadership.
Let's pass this over to Richard for our close. Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you very much. First, I want to also express my appreciation to all of you for participating in this event on Global Ethics Day. This is only one day a year that the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs produces this day. Last year, over 200 organizations around the world produced panel discussions, webinars, podcasts to further the cause of ethics, to make the world more ethical in various fields. I've asked hundreds of people over the past several years, do you think the world needs to become more ethical? And I can't think of one person who said no. Now, this has been going on for thousands of years, that the human condition's been chronically unethical for thousands of years, even though the field of ethics, the subject matter of ethics, has become a field of study, of scholarship. 40 years ago, the universities in the United States started to build centers for ethics on their campuses. But if we look what's happened over the past 40 years, it looks like the world has become less ethical, not more ethical. So there's something very, very mysterious about ethics. Why our educational system does not emphasize and prioritize teaching ethics is it's hard to understand, given how important ethics is. So what the World Ethics Organization is dedicated to doing is innovating ethics. Clearly, what humanity has been doing over the past 2,000 years with ethics is insufficient and is not really working very well. Something new has to happen. And so this is what the World Ethics Organization is dedicated to, is to do the research and innovate around ethics so that people gain a new appreciation for the necessity for ethics and start bringing ethics proactively into their own sphere of influence. So I want to thank you for entering the sphere of influence of the World Ethics Organization and allowing us to share this event with you today. And I encourage you to think about how you can bring ethics explicitly into your own sphere of influence, whether it's at work, whether it's in your communities or at home. And unless we proactively do this, I don't think anything's ever going to change. So it's really up to you and me. So that said, thank you again very much for being here today.